Hello, and welcome to The Rightest Leftist with Nathan Ogilvie, the podcast for the politically homeless. In this episode, we're going to be looking at what is shaping up to be the scandal of the century. And I'll just show everyone's favorite president, the 45th and 47th President of the United States, Donald Trump, who, as I covered in a previous video and is all over the news everywhere, is embroiled in the scandal with his ex-best friend and former close associate, Jeffrey Epstein. In the previous video, I went through the timeline of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein's connections throughout the years. In this video, I want to highlight why this story seems to be sticking around and why Donald Trump's biggest skill in terms of marketing and directing people's attention towards issues that he wants people to focus on or away from things he doesn't want people to focus on, why he's really struggling to distract from this issue, is because it strikes at the heart of Donald Trump's support base's theory, especially around their conspiracy theories about the elites and who really runs the world. Because the essential theory summed up is that there's a global cabal of elite pedophiles that run the government and big business and what might be called the deep state. And they were all working together to hold the everyday people down. Now, there's an element of truth to that, but the genius of what Donald Trump's been able to do is set himself apart from that group and portray himself like he's for the every person, the everyday American in this case, and that he's fighting back against that. But the connection to Jeffrey Epstein makes it really hard to believe that that's actually his intention and what he's doing. And so what I'm going to do is highlight the connections that haven't been answered and why we really need answers on this, and why Donald Trump's base are starting, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are starting to turn on him or at least ask questions about what's really going on. So we'll put Donald Trump in this corner. We'll remind you of his connection with Jeffrey Epstein there. So that's Jeffrey Epstein, who was convicted for child sex offenses and then died in jail. Now, whether that was a suicide or whether he was murdered is still largely debated. It was officially ruled a suicide, but the circumstances around it make it seem very suspicious, including a video that the Trump administration released with a few minutes missing from the footage. So Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were good friends. Now, the missing link to all this is someone called Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, she was never married to Jeffrey Epstein, but she was considered his partner. Some people described her as his girlfriend, and she basically procured the women that Jeffrey Epstein would sexually assault over the years. It's been found that she did that through Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, and especially their massage spa. They would take underage girls and then basically sex traffic them through that. Now, Donald Trump claims that he wasn't aware of that, and that when he found that parts of that out, that's when he disconnected himself from Jeffrey Epstein. But depending on the source that you listen to, that's largely questioned and disputed. So there's an image. So Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell are in many photos together with prominent celebrities, Prince Andrew being one, Queen Elizabeth's favorite son. So the connection here and why this conspiracy does actually have a lot of merit to it, aside from a lot of baseless conspiracy theories that don't have all that much evidence, is Ghislaine Maxwell's father was called Robert Maxwell, and he had deep ties to Israel and their version of the CIA, or their spy agency called Mossad. Now, this is an image of Robert Maxwell there, and an image of him with, at the time, not the president, but then, or prime minister, but eventually the prime minister of Israel in the 2000s, Ariel Sharon. And he had a lot of business ties to a lot of prominent people, not just in Israel, but all over the world. And the theory goes that Ghislaine Maxwell was part of the family business and was also working for Mossad as well to gather intelligence on prominent political and business figures around the world, but particularly in the US and the UK. So that's where this theory gains ground, because in that context, if that's really what Ghislaine Maxwell's role or job was to gather that information, you can see how Jeffrey Epstein could fit into that, where what they would do is on his island fly people over there. And we know Donald Trump went over there because he's on the flight records. A lot of other prominent people like Bill Clinton. So this isn't a left or right Republican or Democrat thing, because there were definitely left-wing Democrats that were involved in this as well. But essentially, the theory goes that they were gathering blackmail material on them. And people even in Trump's own administration talk about that they saw large numbers of child exploitation material, child sex abuse material that includes children photographed or videoed with prominent world figures. And so I think why Trump is so resistant to release the Epstein files is, if you put all this together, why would Trump not be in those files? He was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. There's those videos of him and Jeffrey Epstein hanging out with young women. I'm sure the women in the videos were of age, but there was numerous accusations against Trump from those younger women. One I described from 2016, who ended up dropping a lawsuit around the time of the election, whether that was due to intimidation or lack of evidence and not wanting to go through with it. That's something that we can debate. But the only thing that's really missing is that connection between Ghislaine Maxwell and Donald Trump. And she's just recently been moved from a prison in Florida to a lower security prison in Texas, because she's also been found guilty of facilitating all the child sexual abuse that went on. She's still alive. She hasn't killed herself or been killed potentially yet. But it looks like what they're setting up is that she has met with Donald Trump's, some people in his Department of Justice who are formerly private lawyers for him. She's been meeting with them, and it looks like they're trying to set up some kind of arrangement where she will name names or add to the files and sort of confirm a lot of what's already been out there. Because this thing with the Jeffrey Epstein files is a lot of it's already been released, and a lot of it is already out there, which I will put in the link in the description. But what hasn't been, the connection that hasn't been made yet, is like the smoking gun of Donald Trump being directly involved in the sex crimes. And then there's people like Michael Wolff who sat down and recorded a lot of audio with Jeffrey Epstein and saw a lot of images and photos from Jeffrey Epstein himself. And he says he's seeing images with Donald Trump and underage women in various stages of being undressed, sitting on his lap, which the public hasn't seen. The public may never see. It looks like the infrastructure to keep it all hidden is so tight, and it's why Donald Trump is doing all the things he's doing at the moment to try and distract away from it. Because if that ever got out, I mean, you would hope that would finally end his control over the Republican Party and any credibility he has as a president, which I actually think he has very little. He did win the popular vote, but if this was all known and properly brought out before that, he should never have even got close to not just winning a second time, but winning the first time. Because the things he's been alleged to do and the connections are, it's bad enough that we don't even have the footage or the photos, but if those were ever to be released, you would hope that the general public would, or at least a portion of them, would turn against him enough that he has to be impeached and removed. Now, I'm not an idiot, and I do live in the real world and know that for the Republicans to do that, that would mean admitting defeat and loss, and how stupid that they were to have ever believed Trump in the first place, and they never will do that. That's why so many people struggle to leave cults, because it's harder to admit fault and leave than to just stay in and be a part of it. So I don't actually think that's going to happen. But I don't know if this story and this scandal of the century is ever going to go away unless the proper answers are given, because I am waiting for when they do eventually say Ghislaine Maxwell is ready to talk, or if Trump pardons her, and how his base and supporters react to that. Are they going to twist themselves into a logic pretzel and try and explain it away? Maybe. But the ones that actually follow the details of this conspiracy and all the connections, it's pretty clear that something dodgy has been going on. And let's hope that eventually we get to the bottom of it, because I don't know if this story is going to go away until we actually do. Please let me know if you want to hear more about this. I'm following the story with great interest, and I'm keeping myself updated, and I'll be looking forward to keeping you updated with future videos on this topic as well. My name is Nathan Ogilvie. This is The Rightest Leftist, the podcast for the politically homeless, and let's talk again soon.